It started.
Okay. Hi guys, I'm Miss Jill. I'm at the Greenwood Lake Public Library and I'm going to do a little story time on the computer for you guys today. So I'm going to read this book. It's called The Tales of Peter Rabbit. The lady that wrote this, her name is Beatrix Potter. She wrote lots of stories about animals and we have lots of different copies of it. So if you're ever around and you want to read more stories, these are good ones. Okay. Here we go. Once upon a time, there were 4 little rabbits, and their names were Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail, and Peter. They lived with their mother in a sandbank underneath the root of a very big fir tree. That's like a pine tree. We have those in Greenwood Lake. "Now, my dears," said old Mrs. Rabbit, "you may go into the fields or down the lane, but don't go into Mr. McGregor's garden." Okay, here's all the bunnies. There's the mom warning them, don't go in the garden. But bunnies like gardens because they have good things to eat there. "Your father had an accident there, and he was put in a pie by Mrs. McGregor. Now run along and don't get into any mischief. I'm going out." Then old Mrs. Rabbit took a basket and her umbrella and went through the wood to the baker's. She bought a loaf of brown bread and 5 currant buns. Currants are like raisins. Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail were good little bunnies. They went down the lane to gather the blackberries. But Peter, who was very naughty, ran straight away to guess where? Mr. McGregor's garden. And he squeezed under the gate. He was being bad. First he ate some lettuces. Remember I told you there's good things in the garden? And some French beans. And then he ate some radishes. I love radishes. And then, feeling rather sick, he went to go look for some parsley because parsley can make your tummy feel better. He's probably sick because he ate too much. But round the end of the cucumber frame, whom should he meet but Mr. McGregor? Mr. McGregor was on his hands and knees planting out young cabbages, but he jumped up and he ran after Peter, waving a rake and calling out, "Stop, thief!" I hope that Peter Rabbit's fast. Peter was most dreadfully frightened. He rushed all over the garden, for he had forgotten the way back to the gate. He lost one of his shoes among the cabbages, and the other shoe amongst the potatoes. Who found the shoe? A little sparrow. After losing them, he ran on 4 legs, and he went faster. So I think that he might have got away altogether if he had not unfortunately run into a gooseberry net and got caught by the large buttons on his jacket. It was a blue jacket with brass buttons, and it was quite new. See, these nets are there to catch the berries if they fall, and he got caught in it. Peter gave himself up for lost and shed big tears. They also keep the birds away. But his sobs were overheard by some friendly sparrows, who flew to him in great excitement and implored him to exert himself. That means they try to get him to try harder. Mr. McGregor came up with a sieve, like a big basket type thing, which he intended to pop upon the top of Peter. But Peter wriggled out just in time, leaving his jacket behind him. He rushed into the tool shed and jumped into a can, and it would have been a beautiful thing to hide in if it had not had so much water in it. See the water splashing out? Well, Mr. McGregor was quite sure that Peter was somewhere in the tool shed, perhaps hidden underneath a flower pot. He began to turn them carefully over, looking under each. Presently, Peter sneezed. "Kerchoo!" Mr. McGregor was after him in no time. He tried to put his foot upon Peter, who jumped out of a window, upsetting 3 plants. The window was too small for Mr. McGregor, and he was tired of running after Peter. He went back to his work. Lucky thing, see, he was trying to step on him. See how he's got sharp things on his boot? That might have hurt him. Peter sat down to rest. He was out of breath and trembling with fright, and he had not the least idea which way to go. Also, he was very damp from sitting in the can. But after a time, he began to wander about, going lippity-lippity, not very fast, and looking all around. He found a door in a wall, but it was locked. There was no room for a fat little rabbit to squeeze underneath. See, he can't get under there. There's no room. An old mouse was running in and out over the stone doorstep, carrying peas and beans back to her family in the wood. Peter asked her the way to the gate, but she had such a large pea in her mouth that she could not answer. She only shook her head at him. Peter began to cry. Then he tried to find his way straight across the garden, but he became more and more puzzled. That means he was getting more and more confused. Presently, he came upon a pond where Mr. McGregor filled his watering cans. A white cat was staring at some goldfish. She sat very, very still. But now and then the tip of her tail twitched, as if it were alive. Peter thought it would best to go away without speaking to her. He had heard about cats from his cousin, little Benjamin Bunny. Because bunnies shouldn't play with cats. Usually cats win. He went back towards the tool shed, but suddenly, quite close to him, he heard the noise of a hoe. Scratch, 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 scratch. Peter scuttered underneath the bushes. But presently, as nothing happened, he came out, and he climbed upon a wheelbarrow and peeped over. The first thing he saw was Mr. McGregor hoeing onions. His back was turned towards Peter, and beyond him was the gate. Peter got down very quietly off of the wheelbarrow and started running as fast as he could along a straight walk behind some black currant bushes. Mr. McGregor caught sight of him at the corner, but Peter did not care. He slipped underneath the gate and was safe at last in the wood outside the garden. Mr. McGregor hung up the little jacket and the shoes for a scarecrow to frighten away the blackbirds. Peter never stopped running or looking behind him till he got home to the big fir tree. He was so tired that he flopped down on the nice, soft sand on the floor of the rabbit hole and shut his eyes. His mother was busy cooking. She wondered what he had done with his clothes. It was the second little jacket and pair of shoes that Peter had lost in a fortnight. I'm sorry to say that Peter was not very well that evening. His mother put him to bed, made him some chamomile tea, and she gave a dose of it to Peter. 1 tablespoonful to be taken at bedtime, she said. But Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail, remember, they weren't naughty. They had bread and milk and blackberries for supper. And that's a very good supper for a bunch of bunnies. Isn't that a good story? The end. So that's the tale of Peter Rabbit. In this one, there's Jemima Puddle Duck. And in these, there's a whole bunch of different ones. Kittens, more bunnies, frogs, you name it. They're all in there. Okay, now we did the bunny one, so I thought we should do a bunny craft. So I took this cup, okay? It's just a plain old cup. You could use paper. I used plastic because it's a little bit bigger for my hand. And I made 2 holes. That's all. And all I'm going to do on this cup is I'm going to take a little glue, put it right in the middle, just like that. Piece of cake. Stick a cotton ball. Next thing I'm going to do, take a marker, and I'm going to draw 1 J and a backwards J. Easy. And I have these little stick-on eyes, but you could just draw these, or you could use buttons, or you could use plain old black stickers, whatever you like. And I'm going to put 1 button eye there, 1 sticker eye there, and then all I have to do to make it into a bunny, stick my fingers right through. There's my Peter Rabbit. Okay, and yours doesn't have to be pink. It could be whatever color you like. Easy, right? Okay, so that's our story time. If you ever want to come and read these books, I'll help you find them. But you should look under P for Potter, because that's the name that the lady wrote them is. I hope I see you guys at the library soon. Bye.